Hey there. Welcome back to Nothing But Anime. It's time for part 4 of our What If Deku Had Powerful Weapon Quirk series. If you're having fun with the content, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more. Let's jump right in and see what happens next. Izuku leaned against the outside of a nearby building, staring up at the one across the street that housed the fake bomb. Alright, this is the last match of the day. Do we put on a show, or do we go for efficiency? Shako hummed. If it was Aizawa-sensei leading the exercise, I'd say to go for efficiency without question. But since it's All Might, I'm not sure. I feel like his idea of a good plan involves a lot of fancy techniques. Did you see his face when Kuda swarmed the building with the rats? Izuku winced and nodded. True. Then again, Aizawa-sensei has a point. Being overly flashy out in the field is just going to cost lives. So I say we ignore All Might and treat this like a real scenario. How's your training been going? I know that before the entrance exam, you couldn't reliably float yourself. But how's that been working out for you? Shako hummed. Well, I still can't remove my own gravity. I can, however, just lessen it slightly so that it feels like I'm on the moon. If you carried me. Izuku grinned. I see what you're getting at. His extreme gear appeared in his left hand. All Might's voice rang out. The 5 minutes of prep time are up. Heroes, you may now enter the building. Ochako tapped her arm with 5 fingers, and Izuku grabbed her by the arm with his right hand. He hopped onto his extreme gear, immediately feeling her lessened weight. Grinning, he leaned forward, and they shot across the street towards the building. As they approached, Izuku pushed down with his back foot, and they shot up the wall before cresting the edge of the roof and skidding to a stop. Ochako released her quirk and started towards the roof access door, only to pause when Izuku held up a hand. His extreme gear dissipated, and a metal bat appeared in his hand. Carefully, he stepped towards the door, nudging it open with the bat and quickly settling into a defensive stance. Nothing happened, and he glanced back at Ochako and nodded. Together, they silently crept down the stairs, and Izuku glanced around the corner as they neared the stairwell on the 5th floor. He watched as Satu ran down the stairs, swallowing some kind of powder as he passed. Zero used the tape from his elbows to set up a barricade in the hallway leading from the stairs, before heading down to the 4th floor for surveillance. Izuku and Ochako quietly moved back up to the roof, and Izuku's bat disappeared. A rocket belt appeared on his back, and he fell off the side of the roof, hovering in midair and circling the building once. After his sweep, he flew up and landed on the roof, the rocket belt dissipating as he walked over to Ochako. Bombs taped to the ceiling in a room on the 5th floor. It's on the opposite side of the building from the hallway that Zero taped up. She frowned. So it was a trick designed to lead us down an empty hallway so that they could corner us. Of course, they had to make it look realistic by moving away from there. What's the plan? Izuku grinned and manifested his sword ability. We hit hard and we hit fast. I'll break the window, and you watch my back while I get the bomb down. I'll also need you to catch it and lessen its weight, since in a real scenario, a drop from the ceiling could cause it to detonate. Shako nodded. Gotcha. Can your extreme gear fit 2 people? Izuku smirked. Who says we need it? He ran towards the edge of the roof, hopping off and grabbing the ledge with his free hand. He swung around, foot slamming into the window and shattering it on impact. He dropped into the room, immediately running over to where the bomb was taped to the ceiling. Ochako was right behind him, positioning herself underneath it and facing towards the door. Izuku jumped up and carefully slashed through the tape on both sides of the prop, allowing it to fall into Ochako's waiting arms. Zero appeared in the doorway right as Ochako caught the bomb, immediately lessening its gravity and carefully setting it down on the floor. All Might's voice rang out. The bomb has been secured. Hero team wins. A minute later, the 4 students walked into the observation room. All Might boomed. Good performance, heroes. Due to how short this match was, I won't bother asking about the MVP, but I will ask this. Where did the villain team go wrong? Katsuki raised his hand. Simple. They assumed the heroes would use the front door, and forgot about the roof access. How they forgot that Izuku has flying machines in his inventory is beyond me, considering he used one just yesterday for the endurance run, but whatever. Point is, they made an assumption and disregarded important details, thereby allowing the hero team to swoop in and secure the bomb with basically no issue. All Might coughed into his fist. Yes. Well, that is correct, young Bakugu. In any case, win or lose, I would like you all to take something away from today's exercise. In an instant, the hero was standing by the door to the observation room. Now, watch how a pro exits. Like he's got somewhere to be. All Might raced out of the training ground, the only sign of his former presence being a cloud of dust still lingering in the air. As the class started to move back towards the buses, Kyuka walked up to Izuku and slung an arm around his waist. Don't think I didn't notice the 2 of you holding hands. Izuku blushed furiously. Oh, come on. You know that it was just so I could carry her up to the roof. Kyuka giggled and elbowed him playfully. I know. I just like teasing you, you big dork. Katsuki snorted as he fell into step beside them. You'd think he'd realize after a couple weeks of dating you. Kyuka grinned at the blonde. It's part of his charm. He plays the oblivious cinnamon role really well. Izuku's blush deepened and he started stammering incoherently. Kyuka and Katsuki started laughing, and Ochako joined in as they headed towards the bus. Fumikage followed at a slight distance, chuckling to himself. Once they changed out of their hero costumes, the hero hopefuls all headed towards the support studio together. It only took a few minutes, considering Izuku had memorized the map of UA provided in the syllabus. As they approached the metal double doors, some sixth sense caused Izuku to manifest his Hylian shield and pull Quirk close, just before an explosion blew the doors open. Loud cackling could be heard from inside, alongside loud groaning. Damn it, Hatsum, that's your 8th explosion, and it's only the 2nd day of classes. The cackling grew louder. Come on, sensei. Explosions are a sign of failure, and failure is a mark of progress. It's part of my creative process. I only want the best for my babies. Izuku grinned and dropped the shield, letting it hit the floor and dissipate. That's gotta be her. He strode through the fading cloud of smoke, letting out a piercing whistle. Oi, gremlin! His vision was suddenly full of yellow eyes, palish skin, and pink hair. Hey, boss. I see you brought the gang with you. Great to see ya in person. Hatsum May, support genius and future CEO of Hatsum Industries. I heard you used your costumes for foundational heroics today. How'd my babies hold up? Quirk smirked. Beautifully. The speakers were great, and I definitely appreciated the alloy in the jacket. Katsuki chuckled. Same. The braces made a 5-story drop feel like nothing, so good job on those. I'm impressed with the details on the gauntlets. You managed to get the mechanisms functional, but kept the tanks from actually siphoning my sweat so that they didn't have any chance to misfire. Hatsum grinned. Sounds like I'm sporting 100% customer satisfaction so far. She glanced over at the others. You must be the other hero hopefuls, though we seem to be down a guy. Who's missing? Izuku coughed into his fist. We still haven't heard from Mr. Twister since the school year started. I'll ping him this afternoon and ask. Hatsum shrugged. Oh well, can't be helped. She clapped her hands together. So, now that you've experienced your costumes for the first time, do you want any changes or upgrades? Shako winced. My costume designer put me in high heels. They look nice, but they totally killed my feet by the end of the exercise. The bracers are a little uncomfortable, too. Think you could fix that? Hatsum beamed. Not a problem. Do you know who your costume designer is? They probably have your measurements on file, which means I won't have to take M myself. Ochako frowned and pulled a piece of paper out of her bag, scanning it briefly. It says here that his name is Guman. Hatsum's expression immediately fell. Oh, him. Izuku frowned. What's wrong with Guman? A nearby support student groaned. Don't even get me started. Not even a day in, and the dude's already a total asshat. Never listens to anyone except Power Loader, and even then it's only when it benefits him. Izuku glanced over at the student, noticing the thick, grayish hair and dark gray eyes. She held up a hand in greeting. Tanso Haimo. My Quirk turns my hair into a carbon steel alloy that's pretty durable. Makes for great gadget material. But yeah, Guman's a real piece of work. Quirk raised an eyebrow. How bad could he be? A door at the back of the room swung open, and a short, round boy walked out, his eyes immediately latching onto Ochako. Ah, a customer. He walked over, strutting in far too close to be polite. How can I help you? Ochako backed up a few paces. Guman, right? I heard that you made my costume. He grinned. Ah, you must be the Uraraka girl in the hero course. Did you find my creation to your liking? Before she could answer, he barreled over her and said, Of course you did. I only provide the best. He glanced over at Izuku. I heard you had your costume designed by this wench. He pointed his thumb at Hatsum with a scowl on his face. I truly pity you. When you grow tired of your current costume, please come to me. I'll make you something leagues better than anything this woman could put out. He fell silent at the death glares being sent his way from every direction. Izuku growled. For your information, Ochako has expressly stated her discomfort with her costume, which already knocks your reputation down a peg. In addition, those of us whose costumes were designed by Hatsum are immensely satisfied. So you claiming to be better than her makes your standing even worse. Kirishima spoke up. But even without the whole support thing, the fact that you're so clearly sexist is just not cool, man. We're living in the 23rd century. How are you still clinging to a thought process from the American Civil War? Guman huffed and straightened his glasses. Preposterous. History has proven that we are superior in every way that matters. Strength, stamina, intelligence. Men have beaten women in every category. The door at the front of the room slammed open, and Power Loader stormed into the workshop, looking absolutely done. Guman, detention for 2 weeks. I will not have that incredibly outdated and idiotic thinking in my classroom. Guman scoffed and wiped at his hair. Geniuses are never understood in their time. They say Einstein was hated, you know? Hatsum rolled her eyes. Police, who gives a crap about Einstein in here? We're support technicians, not physicists. What did Einstein do for technology? Jack shit, that's what. Guman huffed. So? Name one woman who actually contributed to anything. Oh wait, you can't. Because women are always far and away inferior to us men. Power Loader snarled. You want to see just how good your classmates are? Then you're the class test dummy for the next 4 weeks. Anyone wanting to test their inventions will take precedence over your own projects. Any of them. Guman finally went pale. But, sir? No. I do not allow sexism or arrogance in my workshop, and you've proven yourself to be a fountain of both. UA does not tolerate that sort of behavior. Hatsum pulled a monkey wrench out of her toolbox and smacked it against her palm threateningly. You want to see inferior, bub? I'll show you inferior, and plenty of it. The next morning, Izuku, Katsuki, and Kyuka rounded the corner between the train station and UA to find a crowd of people standing in front of the entrance. The blonde mused, "What the hell is that about?" Izuku noticed cameras and microphones being waved around, and he groaned. "Fucking great. Reporters." Fumikage grunted, having just caught up to the trio. "If only I could keep my costume's EMP with me at all times." Katsuki huffed. "Whatever. Let's at least figure out if we can get around them." As they approached, they could see the reporters hounding various students as they tried to push their way through the gate. Izuku heard one reporter shout, "What's it like to be taught by All Might?" He groaned again. "They're here because All Might took up a teaching position. They keep hounding the first years, which I'm pretty sure is illegal." Kyuka patted him on the arm. "Give him hell, babe." Izuku grinned, before walking forward, mentally checking his inventory to see if he'd stocked anything electrical. A reporter caught sight of him, and he was instantly swarmed. "Young man, what can you tell us about All Might being a teacher here at UA?" Another reporter shouted, "Hey, you're a hero kid. You must have had All Might yesterday. What's he like as a teacher?" Izuku scoffed. "The man's terrible. He's a great hero, don't get me wrong, but he has no clue how to actually teach a class of 15-year-olds with godlike power. I'm honestly surprised and grateful that nobody got seriously injured yesterday." A reporter shouted, "Yeah, right, kid. Now come on. Give us the truth. We need answers, damn it." Izuku snorted. "You don't need shit from me, though I am feeling generous." The reporters crowded closer, and Izuku's face morphed into a shit-eating grin. Zon Partizan's spear manifested in his grip, and he stabbed it into the pavement, causing a surge of electricity that thankfully didn't hurt anyone. But all of their electrical equipment was shorted out. As the reporters panicked, trying to get their gear to work again, Izuku released his spear and motioned towards the trio still standing by the corner. The four of them ran past the reporters and through the gate. One particularly brave woman stepped forwards with her arm outstretched, and the gate beeped, sheets of metal slamming upwards and cutting off the flood of reporters. Aizawa-sensei walked up and huffed as the four of them caught their breath. "I knew they were stupid, but to trigger the UA barrier? That's a whole new level of idiocy. I'll let the public quirk usage slide this time, problem child. Now get to class, you don't want to be late." Chapter 15. Aizawa-sensei walked in just as the bell rang, nodding in satisfaction at the silence in the room. "Good. I took the liberty of looking over the footage from yesterday's training exercise. Good job not causing any serious injuries, and most of you kept collateral damage to a minimum." He glared at Todoroki, who ignored him. "For those of you who won, don't think that you're good where you are. Never think you don't have room to grow. Those of you who lost, don't give up. Learn from your mistakes, yes, but don't let them keep you from improving. Understood?" "Yes, Aizawa-sensei." "Good. In other announcements, today you'll have to make a decision that'll affect the rest of your schooling." Nobody dared to breathe. "You'll be picking a class representative." There was a collective sigh of relief, before the room devolved in chaotic shouting. Nearly everyone put their hand up, all clamoring to be picked. Ida stood up and shouted, "Everyone, please, be rational about this. Clearly, if we cannot come to a consensus, then we should hold a vote to determine the class representative." Azui raised her hand. "Wouldn't everyone just vote for themselves, Karo? We've only had 2 days of school, and only a single day of classes. All the more reason to do so. Anyone who has already earned another's vote in such a short time is clearly fit for the role." Izuku rolled his eyes. "Just include a rule saying that people can't vote for themselves. It's not that hard." Ida turned to where Aizawa-sensei was laying against the wall in his sleeping bag. "Sir, is that acceptable to you?" The man sighed. "I don't care. Just get it done before homeroom ends." "Thank you, sir." Yaoyorozu pulled 20 sheets of paper out of her bag, and they passed around the room, falling silent except for the sound of scribbling pencils. Once everyone had put down their pencils, Ida went around and collected the votes, sifting through them before writing the results up on the board. Midoriya Izuku 9 votes, Yaoyorozu Momo 8 votes, Bakugo Katsuki 2 votes, Ida Tenya 1 vote. Aizawa-sensei sat up and huffed. "There you have it. Midoriya is class rep, Yaoyorozu is vice rep. Congratulations or whatever. Class dismissed." He stood up and hobbled out of the room, still in his sleeping bag. At lunchtime, Izuku, Kyuka, and Katsuki were joined by Yaoyorozu, Ida, and Tsu, as Katsuki remembered she liked to be called. After the initial scarfing of food, Ida wiped his face with his napkin and turned to Izuku. "Midoriya-kun, congratulations on being voted for class representative. I must admit, I was hoping to secure the position for myself, but I am wise enough to admit that you have earned it." Izuku grinned. "Not a problem, Ida. Not gonna lie, part of me is afraid that I'm not good enough for the job, but I've recognized that as the part of me that's still waiting for the other shoe to drop. Sue frowned. Why's that, Karo? My quirk manifested late. Like, start of junior high late. Before then, I was diagnosed as quirkless because I hadn't presented one at age 4. I lived in an area where being the quirkless kid wasn't exactly the best position to be in. Sue winced. That's rough, Karo. Some of the other kids at my elementary school used to be rude to me because of how my quirk made me act. I can't imagine how bad it must have been for you when you thought you didn't have a quirk. Izuku nodded and glanced down at his tray. Sometimes, I have the worrying thought that I'll wake up, and this'll all be a dream, that I'll be back at Aldera, quirkless and suffering. Ida opened his mouth to say something, only to be cut off by the alarm system going off. Level 3 security breach. All students, please evacuate the building calmly. Repeat, Level 3 security breach. All students, please evacuate the building calmly. The cafeteria devolved into pandemonium, the entire student body cramming through the doors and immediately filling up the adjacent hallway. At one point, Izuku got shoved into the window, forced to look outside as his face got smushed by the tide of people. He noticed the reporters from earlier streaming through where the gate should be, and he could feel his temper steadily rising. He pulled himself up onto the windowsill before jumping from head to head in the direction of the exit. Thankfully, or unfortunately, depending on your viewpoint, the crowd wasn't moving all that much, so Izuku didn't need to do a lot in the way of course-correcting in midair. Once he got close, he crouched down and springboarded off the head of an upperclassman, landing on top of the door frame. Turning to face the crowd, he shouted, "Everybody shut up." The crowd fell silent and looked up at him, and he pointed towards the windows. "It's just the media. Now calm down and leave through the doors in an orderly fashion. You're UA students. You should know better than to panic in a crisis." The crowd started thinning as it steadily moved out the double doors, and Izuku nodded in satisfaction. Noticing a familiar head of blonde hair in the crowd, he looked for a gap and timed it just right so that he fell from the doorframe and landed right next to Katsuki. "How'd I do for my first day on the job?" Katsuki snorted and ruffled the other boy's hair. "Not bad, nerd." The following morning, the crowd of reporters was thankfully absent. During homeroom, Aizawa-sensei announced, "This afternoon, for Foundational Heroics, you'll be taking a field trip to a remote part of campus. In attendance will be myself, All Might, and a third staff member. It will be up to you whether or not you wear your hero costumes. It won't make much of a difference. The bus will be in the same parking lot as 2 days ago, and will start loading up at 1 p.m. That afternoon, one quickly changed into their hero costumes and gathered in the parking lot just as the bus pulled up into its designated spot. As they filed on, Izuku noticed that the front half of the bus seemed to be open seating like a train car, while the back half was a traditional setup. Interesting choice, but whatever. After they'd all sat down, the bus headed off. After a minute or so of awkward silence, Sue poked her head over the back of Izuku's seat. "Midoriya, Karo. I tend to speak my mind a lot, so I'm sorry if this seems blunt, but I wanted to ask, what exactly is your quirk? I've seen you make a lot of different items over the past couple days, and I was wondering what sort of limits it has, Karo." Izuku shrugged. "Reasonable question. I call it save file. Basically, once I've seen and used an item in a video game, I can store it in a mental inventory of sorts and use the fat in my cells to later create it in real life. And before anyone asks, no, I'm pretty sure I'm not related to Yaoyorozu." Todoroki glanced out the window with a mostly blank expression that held just the slightest bit of embarrassment. "Knew somebody would think it." Shiro whistled in admiration. "That's a pretty cool quirk. What all can you make with it?" Izuku hummed. "Basically, anything that operates within the laws of physics. You've all seen my hoverboard, which is theoretically possible with real-world technology, so it doesn't take up much space in my inventory. However, items that push the boundaries of physics take up more space, and ones that break it completely are a no-no. For instance, the size-changing sword I used during the entrance exam to slice the zero-pointer in half is on the pricier end of the spectrum, since while something that changes sizes like that is technically not possible, it's still mostly a base physics save for me being able to swing it. However, something that just outright creates other matter, like an infinity bow from Minecraft, is out of the question. I only have so much space in my inventory, and I have even fewer equipped slots. There are a few things that I can store but not equip, though that should change with training. Oh, and sentient things are also out of the question." Sato whistled. "Wow, you sure know a lot about it. Did you figure that all out yourself when training for UA?" Izuku smirked and rubbed at his neck sheepishly. "Well, I did have a little help. See, because my quirk needs me to play video games in order to have something to store and equip, I thought I was quirkless for the longest time. It was only about a month into my first year of junior high that I thought I might have a quirk, and I ended up getting an appointment with Mawakaru Mamoto to help me figure it out." Ochako's eyes widened. "And you could afford it? How rich are you?" Izuku snorted. "It wasn't as expensive as it would be for most people. Mawakaru-san actually has a bit of a soft spot for people who are misdiagnosed as quirkless, considering the same thing happened to her, and she knows how bad things can get for quirkless people. I ended up getting a pretty big discount for the appointment." Everyone started talking all at once, only to fall silent when Aizawa-sensei announced, "Quiet, we're here." Izuku stared up at the giant glass dome in front of them. "UA never does anything halfway, do they?" Katsuki snorted. "I should hope the fuck not. Otherwise the motto wouldn't make any damn sense. As they walked closer, their attention was drawn to a figure standing by the double doors at the entrance, wearing yellow sneakers and a spacesuit. Hello, Class 1A. As some of you may know, I am the Space Hero 13. Welcome to my pride and joy of UA's campus, the Unforeseen Simulation Joint. Within our 6 zones designed to test your mettle in rescue heroics, each designed to simulate various natural disasters. Aizawa-sensei walked up to the other teacher, a scowl on his face. Where's the blonde buffoon? He was supposed to be here with you. 13 sighed. Apparently, he got held up stopping crime on his way to work. He'll only be able to join us by the end of the class. Aizawa-sensei groaned. The height of irrationality. The man has a duty to teach the students now. He can't just run off and do hero work in an area already saturated with capable heroes. He turned to face the class. Right? Unfortunately, All Might will not be able to join us for today's class. But I don't think he'll be missed all that much, considering rescue isn't exactly the man's area of expertise. 13 nodded. Now, before we head inside, allow me to say a few things. You all know my quirk. Black hole, yes? Ochako nodded emphatically. You've used it to help in so many rescue operations. Quite true. However, it is also a power that can far too easily kill. A hushed silence descended over the group. One thing that is important for all heroes to know is restraint. My quirk sucks things in and turns them to dust. I'm sure you'd rather not imagine what would happen if I turned that on a human being. I'm certain most of your powers are the same way. The teacher clapped their hands together. But that is why you are here, to learn proper restraint and control. My USJ is designed to help you find out new and heroic applications of your quirks. Now, let us go inside. As they entered, a chill ran down Izuku's spine. He rumbled, "Careful, guys. Something doesn't feel right here. Call it a hunch." Katsuki and Kyuka immediately settled into defensive stances, followed closely by the rest of the hero hopefuls. The teachers and other students glanced at them in confusion, only to go pale when a small cloud of black fog whirled into existence down by the fountain. The fog grew to the height of a person, and a dehydrated hand came through, clutching the edge of the cloud. It was followed by a face covered in a severed hand, which preceded a body covered in other hands wearing dark clothing and bright red sneakers. The fog grew to enormous size within seconds, and several figures began walking through, assembling a veritable army in the plaza. A massive black figure walked out of the fog, standing behind the villain that had emerged first. Once the last villain had emerged, the fog shrank, coalescing into a figure the height of a man. The man with the hand on his face glanced up at them, and Izuku felt another chill run down his spine. Eraserhead, the guy with the severed hands, is the most dangerous. The teacher nodded, sliding his goggles down over his face. Understood. 13, take the students and get out while you can. I'll hold them off while you get reinforcements. Izuku grabbed the hero's arm. That's a hell of a lot more people than your usual strategy. Be careful, alright? We still need a homeroom teacher after this. Eraserhead grinned at the student. Get moving, problem child. The class needs their representative. I thought UA students knew better than to panic in a crisis. Izuku snorted, before turning and running back towards the class. They were already most of the way to the doors, being shepherded in that direction by 13 and the hero hopefuls. In the back of his head, Izuku noticed Eraserhead jumping down the stairs to confront the army of villains down below. All of a sudden, the black fog from earlier swirled into existence between the class and the door, and now Izuku could make out the 2 glowing yellow eyes near the top of it. Greetings. We are the League of Villains. We have come to this prestigious school so that All Might may take his last breath. And yet, it seems he is not here. Was the information we retrieved inaccurate? Izuku inhaled sharply. These bastards caused the media break-in yesterday to get information on when All Might would be away from the main campus. They've thought this out. The Mist Man sighed. Ah well, All Might or not, my role is the same. Scatter you all and torture you to death. His body exploded outwards, but one of 13's finger caps popped open. A powerful vortex began sucking in the clouds of mist, and Izuku could make out a metal brace around where the villain's neck would be. He's got a physical body somewhere under all that fog. The trick is getting to it. Acting on reflex, Izuku darted to the side. With the Mist Man occupied by 13, Izuku took the opportunity to run around to the villain's back, quickly summoning his Meta Knight sword and sending a crescent shot slamming into the metal brace. The villain went down and 13 shut off their quirk. Katsuki was on the man in an instant, pinning him to the ground by his brace. Stay down, asshat, Izuku shouted. Let's move it, people. Ida, run ahead to the main campus and get the teachers. You're the fastest one here. Go. The blue-haired teen nodded and sped over to the double doors, forcing them open and disappearing through the gap. Suddenly, a burst of electricity forced the doors to shut, and a blast of fire welded them together, sealing the class inside the dome. 2 villains stepped out from the plants lining the entryway, one with yellow hair and one with orange hair. The orange-haired one smirked, holding up a hand filled with blazing fire. Well, we may not have stopped you from calling the cavalry, but we can at least have some fun with you in the time we have left. Izuku vanished, reappearing in front of the villain and knocking him out with a metal bat to the head. The yellow-haired villain turned towards him, only to be blasted into the wall of the USJ by Quirk's sound waves. Izuku jogged over to where 13 was still standing. We're sealed in. Even with your quirk, getting through the doors will take time, while there are still plenty of villains around that could attack us and take up your attention. Do we have your permission to use our quirks? 13 nodded. Do what you must to survive as long as you can. You are authorized to use your quirks to defend yourselves, but try not to fight unless you are attacked. Izuku turned towards the plaza where Eraserhead was still fighting. He quickly ran through the options in his mind before making a decision. His extreme gear appeared in his left hand. His metal bat still clutched in his right. Fuck waiting to be attacked. I'm going to go assist Eraserhead. Don't try to stop me, 13-sensei. Before the hero could protest, Izuku was already speeding down the stairs. He slipped his headphones over his ears, cutting out the noises of his classmates fighting. He focused on his objective, the crowd of villains still surrounding his teacher. Alright fuckers, you wanna play? Then let's play. Chapter 16. Shoyuta grunted as he bound another 3 villains in his capture scarf and slammed them together, before tossing them off to the side and ducking under the clumsy punch of another thug. Before he could retaliate, however, there was a green blur, and the villain was sent flying into a group of his buddies. The blur slid to a stop next to Shoyuta, and he could make out Midoriya's hero costume. What the hell are you doing, problem child? I thought I told you to evacuate. Midoriya huffed as he smacked another villain in the face. Tried. Katsuki's pinning their warp, but they sealed the doors shut. Ida managed to get out, but for now we're on our own. These guys are total chumps. They're not worth your time. Let us handle these small fry while you go after the ringleaders. Shoyuta sighed, leaning back to avoid a villain's attack and punching the guy in the face. Fine. But if you get killed, I'm finding a way to resurrect you so I can kill you again. Midoriya smirked. Don't worry. I have absolutely zero intention of dying today. Now get moving. Shoyuta nodded and broke away, jumping over the heads of several thugs and landing outside the crowd, immediately running towards the villain covered in severed hands. The man started scratching at his neck. Ah, Eraserhead. Leaving your precious student to the tender mercies of villains? For shame. I thought you had a higher intelligence stat than that. Shoyuta didn't respond, just in case the villain's quirk relied on a vocal response like Hitoshi's. Always pays to be cautious. Paranoia is an underground hero's best friend. The villain dodged around the first swipe of Shuta's capture scarf, immediately darting to the side and backing away. Shoyuta pursued, reactivating erasure after every blink. He heard the villain muttering numbers under his breath, and he swore internally. He's figured out my timing. Shit, I could have sworn the goggles hid that. How'd he know? He blinked again, and suddenly the villain was in his face again. A hand reached towards his face, and Shoyuta ducked, before slamming his elbow into the villain's stomach, only for his elbow to erupt in pain. Shoyuta immediately jumped backwards, internally cursing as he noticed his elbow starting to flake away. Fuck, this must have been the guy who destroyed the gate yesterday. I can't let him touch me. The villain tilted his head back, one hand rubbing at his stomach. Clearly, the impact hadn't been fully stopped by his hand. You're so cool, Eraserhead. He held his hands out. But you're gotten predictable. I can read your tells. Suddenly, 2 gunshots rang out. Lines of red floated in the air for a second, and both of the villain's middle fingers were blown off at the fingertip. He stood there in shock for a few seconds, before howling in pain and dropping to his knees. Glancing back, Shoyuta noticed Midoriya holding a sniper rifle. Did that help, sensei? Shoyuta smirked. Good shooting, problem child. Remind me later to get you some private lessons with snipe. The villain glanced over at Midoriya, and his eyes widened. That's a fucking machina. How the hell? Midoriya's eyes narrowed. You use gaming lingo a lot. What are you, some kind of tryhard? Bet you were expecting this to be an easy boss fight. Unfortunately for you, there's several mini-bosses to get through first. The villain scowled. You're that bush boss player I met in that TF2 match a couple weeks ago, aren't you? Midoriya raised an eyebrow. That must make you dust hands. Bit on the nose, isn't it? The villain snorted. I could say the same about yours. But you see, I'm not the DPS. He turned towards the hulking black figure that hadn't moved since it emerged from the fog. Nomu, grab him. The figure shifted, before seemingly disappearing. Midoriya swore and jumped to the side, just as the figure appeared right in front of where he'd been standing, its arms already swinging forward in a bear hug. Super boss, huh? His rifle dissipated, before his hoverboard and forked sword appeared in his hands. You're gonna need pro gamer strats. The hand villain cackled. You bet. Nomu is our cheat code, the bioengineered anti-symbol of peace. He's been equipped with multiple quirks to make him the ultimate punching bag that punches back, able to take on All Might himself. Midoriya hummed. So he takes hits and he hits back hard, super fast, and I'd wager a guess that he probably regenerates. The hand villain cackled louder. That's right. You're way more than just a mini-boss. You're my player too. Midoriya snorted and readied his sword. Bold of you to assume I'm not player one. The student disappeared in a burst of air, the trail from his hoverboard creating a green ring around the hulking figure. Waves of blue fire started bombarding Nomu from every direction, and Midoriya was moving too fast for the beast to counterattack. Suddenly, the mist villain swirled into existence next to the hand villain. Shigaraki Tamura. Apologies, but I was briefly incapacitated, and one of the students managed to escape in that time. The other students are still sealed within this building, but I fear that the heroes are on their way. We must retreat while we are still able. The hand villain, Shigaraki, grumbled. If I wasn't in such a good mood, and if you weren't our only ticket out, I'd dust you in an instant, Kurojairi. But look, this kid's the player 2 I've been looking for. Kurojairi looked over at where Midoriya was continuing to assault the monster from every direction. Tamura, that boy will surely incapacitate the Nomu, given enough time. Should I intervene? Shigaraki scratched at his neck. Fuck, I hate quick-time events. Fine, if he looks like he's going to destroy it, then you can warp him somewhere else in the building. But I want to see what he's capable of. Shoyuta scowled and moved to step forward, but the growing pain in his elbow made him hiss and drop to one knee. Shigaraki and Kurojairi glanced over at him, and the mist villain paused. That is, Eraserhead. Correct. Shigaraki nodded and strode forward. He's really cool, but he lowered his shields, and I managed to get a status condition on him. The villain crouched in front of Shoyuta. Hurts, doesn't it? Decay is a really painful status condition. If you don't remove the damaged part, it'll just keep growing until it covers your entire body. And if that happens, game over. The villain stood up and stuck his hands in his pockets, hissing as he seemed to remember his severed middle fingers. Since I'm in a good mood, I'll leave you alone for now. But if you try to keep fighting, then I'll have to order Nomu to KO you. So don't hit that continue button. A wave of blue fire flashed between the two of them, and Shigaraki stumbled back as Midoriya put himself between Shoyuta and the villain. I don't know what the hell you're thinking, but stay away from my teacher. Shigaraki sighed. Oh right, you're a part of the hero faction, and your party doesn't like losing members, does it? Such a pain. Midoriya scowled. When your party's limited to only a few members, you try and keep as much of your DPS alive as possible. Shigaraki let out a dry laugh. I like you, player 2. You get me, you speak my language. Sensei's not nearly as fun. Midoriya raised an eyebrow. Sensei? Shigaraki opened his mouth to say something, but Kurojairi cut him off. Tamura, that is enough. Sensei would not appreciate you revealing his secrets at such an early stage. Shigaraki sighed. Kurojairi, I swear on my PS5, if you don't shut up and let me have this, I'm dusting your wine collection. Suddenly, the doors to the USJ blasted open, and a deep voice echoed throughout the dome. IT is all right now. Why? Because I am here. Shigaraki scowled. Took the objective long enough to spawn. Nomu, kill All Might. The beast disappeared, leaving a trail of dust as it sped towards the entrance. All Might ran down in the blink of an eye, intercepting it at the base of the stairs. Midoriya leveled his sword at Shigaraki. Hang on now, I thought we were having a friendly chat, gamer to gamer. How come All Might seems to aggro you with his sheer presence? Shigaraki scowled and started scratching at his neck. You wouldn't understand. All Might always smiles like he can save everyone. But where was he when I was alone on the streets, tired and hungry? Everyone who passed me just looked at me with pity and moved on, expecting a hero to come along and help me. You hero brats would never understand. Midoriya sighed and stabbed his sword into the ground, leaning on the hilt as though it was a cane. I do, actually. The funny thing about my quirk, it had an obscure activation requirement, so I was assumed to be quirkless. You know how much that made me suffer? Every damn day, bullied and belittled by every fucking person around me. Several even implied that I should kill myself and stop burdening my mom by living. And yeah, there were times when I wondered why a hero didn't come and help me. I even tried to talk to a couple nearby agencies. They brushed me off the second I mentioned my quirk status. Shigaraki's eyes widened. You! Midoriya stared at the villain, his hair blowing from the clash between All Might and the Nomu. So yeah, I get it, but I chose to become a hero so that I could help people like me. People who were looked down on by society. People who believe they can't help themselves. Real life isn't like a video game, Shigaraki. We don't have mini-maps or side quest pop-ups. No alliance symbols, no health bars, no distinction between player or NPC. All we can rely on is our own vision. There's no HUD to guide us, no quests to tell us where to go and what to do. There's no tutorial on how to live, you have to make that choice for yourself. And if you let someone else choose for you, then you're the NPC. There was a huge gust of wind, and All Might punched the Nomu so hard that it went flying, crashing through the dome of the USJ and soaring off into the distance. Shigaraki raised his hand to scratch at his neck, only to pause. Kurojairi, let's go. I need to think. The misty villain nodded, part of his body expanding to form a cloud large enough for Shigaraki to walk through. The villain glanced at where Midoriya was standing with his hoverboard in hand. Until next time, player 2. The two villains disappeared, the purple fog fading from existence just as the rest of the faculty showed up. Shoyuta forced himself to stand and limped over to Midoriya. I'd like to know what the hell you were thinking, problem child. You just let two very dangerous villains get away. Midoriya glanced back at him, before looking towards where Shigaraki had been standing. Is Shigaraki really a villain? Or was he coerced into the whole thing? From what I could gather, it seemed like his sensei indoctrinated him into thinking that heroes didn't care. His whole sense of reality just got thrown into question. He's not going to make a move for a little while, and even then, it's hard to say what his next move will be. Shoyuta scowled. He's a villain. He attacked your class. You should have tried to detain him. Midoriya gave him a look. Is the world really all that black and white, sensei? Look me in the eye and answer me seriously. Shoyuta opened his mouth to retort, but then he considered it. Shit, he's got a point. Tamura stumbled into the bar, hissing as the adrenaline faded and the pain returned in full force. Fuck, that hurts. Talk about a debuff. Kurojiri hummed as he coalesced behind the bar, the mist already fading to reveal his bartender's uniform and neck brace underneath. Would you like for me to call for the doctor? Tamura froze, before shaking his head. No, I'm not sure if I want to see that wacko just yet. Player 2. For all his disgusting hero-ness, he had a point. Sensei's always told me that I'm his successor, that I'm supposed to be the next king of evil, but he never asked me if that's what I wanted. Kurojiri hummed. I am sure that Sensei just believes that it is best for you. After all, I doubt that the heroes would accept someone with your quirk into their ranks. Tamura scowled. Are you sure about that? Because when I got the schedule from the teacher's lounge yesterday, I saw a photo on the guy's desk of him and a kid with purple hair, and I recognized the kid from a news article a couple years back. He's from that orphanage in Saitama that got shut down. He's the kid with the mind control quirk. Kurojiri's eyes widened. And I remember seeing him within the ranks of the students. Tamura nodded and looked down at his hands, noticing how the middle fingers had been immediately cauterized at the knuckle, keeping them from bleeding. If the heroes allowed a kid with that kind of quirk to be a hero brat, then who's to say they wouldn't allow someone with a quirk that decays things? Hell, 13's quirk basically does the same thing from a distance, and they're a teacher at UA. Kurojiri hummed. I do not know what that means, but I assure you that Sensei only wants what is best for you. Tamura glanced over at the misty bartender. Do you? Or is that just part of your programming? What? Tamura? What do you mean? Tamura scoffed. If you're not obeying one of my commands, you act like a robot, just doing the same thing over and over until you're told to do something else. Have you ever stopped to consider why you always listen to me? Earlier today, you stayed away from player 2 on my orders, even though something in your code clearly wanted to step in. Why? Kurojiri froze. He warped over to the booth Tamura was sitting in and laid his elbows on the table, head in his hands. I do not know. I do not know who or what I am, or where I came from. All I know is what Sensei and the doctor have told me, that I am to guide and protect you. Tamura nodded. Sensei always said that I was the player in a world of NPCs, that I was allowed to do as I please and destroy whatever I hate. But players choose their route and class for themselves. So either Sensei's a backseat gamer, or he sees himself as a player and me as just another NPC. And I'm not sure which is worse. Kurojiri hummed. I still believe that Sensei has your best interests at heart, but I can see that words will not sway you at this point. Tamura nodded, still looking at his severed fingers. For now, let's just say that Snipe got me on our way out. What Sensei doesn't know won't hurt him, right? The students of 1A had been called over one by one to give their accounts of the day's events. Since they'd gone in order of seat number, Izuku was one of the last ones to be called. He walked over to the police cruiser, recognizing the detective from the news article on Hitoshi's orphanage. Detective Tsukachi, right? The man's eyes widened. Yes, how'd you know? Izuku grinned. Hitoshi talked about you on Discord the day you shut down his orphanage. You know, the one in Saitama? The detective smiled. Ah, right, I see. In any case, I've heard from your classmates that you weren't with them for most of the incident. Mind telling me what happened? Izuku nodded. Just so long as you don't ask questions until I finish. Tsukachi nodded. I can do that. He reached over and turned on a tape recorder, saying clearly, Detective Tsukachi, Mizudafu Police. Taking the statement of Midoriya Izuku on Thursday, April 6, 2254. Izuku quickly launched into a recounting of the events, starting with Kurojiri warping in the crowd of villains. He detailed how 13 had held the villain in place long enough for Izuku to knock him down, allowing Katsuki to pin him. He mentioned how he'd ordered Ida to run ahead to campus, only for the doors to be welded shut as soon as the other boy got out. He talked about how he'd asked 13 for permission to fight before he sped down the steps to assist Aizawa-sensei. He mentioned noticing that Shigaraki's quirk required 5 points of contact, and how he shot off the tips of the villain's fingers. He detailed how the sniper rifle he'd used had a property that instantly cauterized the wounds, preventing Shigaraki from bleeding out. He recounted the discussion he'd had with the villain, how All Might's appearance had made Shigaraki angry, how Izuku had talked to the villain, and his hunch that this sensei was pulling Shigaraki's strings. Once he finished his statement, Tsukachi shut off the recorder, sighed, and buried his face in his hands. Why does everything have to be so complicated? Izuku nodded. Agreed. If only the world was as simple as just heroes and villains. Chapter 17. UA was closed on Friday to give 1A a long weekend to recover from the events of the USJ. Mom was beside herself with worry until Izuku got home and showed that he didn't have a single scratch. She still spent most of the weekend fussing over him, never straying more than a few feet from him. Izuku couldn't blame her. He'd been right smack dab in the middle of a villain attack. On Saturday, Hitoshi informed him through Discord that UA was planning on upgrading its security to ensure that such an attack couldn't happen again. Apparently, the new measures included something that would protect the campus from warp quirks, but the specifics were classified info. The new security measures went into place on Sunday, just in time for 1A to come back to classes on Monday. Right from the start, Izuku could see black boxes lining the fence on the edge of campus, as well as a new gate with a camera and speaker. The gate was automatically closed, and students had to show their ID in order to be allowed through a one-person gap that briefly opened in the metal barricade. Aizawa-sensei walked into the room right as the bell rang, the class already having fallen silent. His right arm was in a sling. Before anyone asks, the injury I sustained at the USJ was not enough to warrant me taking a break from teaching. I am, however, taking a break from hero work, meaning that your foundational heroics classes will be handled by other teachers while I'm healing. But on to more important things, your fight isn't over yet. The sports festival is being held in 2 weeks. Surprisingly, nobody spoke up. Aizawa-sensei continued, the sports festival is a huge opportunity for you as rising heroes. After all, following the sports festival is internship week, and most hero agencies use the festival to decide who to send offers out to. Normally, you wouldn't expect to receive much attention, but after surviving a villain attack, a lot of eyes are going to be on you. Izuku sighed. For better and for worse, right? While we're going to get more attention from the pros, there's also the fact that villains could watch the sports festival to try and figure out our weaknesses. Aizawa-sensei nodded. Exactly. In addition, you'll be required to use code names during the festival this year to help protect your identity. President Mike, who usually MCs, will not be giving out details on quirks like he has in previous years. Your safety is our top priority, but the HPSC wouldn't allow Nedzu to outright cancel the festival, so this is the next best thing. I expect you all to put at least a little thought into code names, since it's highly likely to become your hero name. That's all for today. Dismissed. At lunchtime, Izuku and Kyuka were joined by Ida, Yaoyorozu, Ochako, and Hitoshi. Eventually, the topic of the sports festival came up, and Izuku thought of something. You know, it's never come up, but I'm curious. Why do you guys want to be heroes? Hitoshi snorted. Personally, I want to prove the naysayers wrong. Become a hero and rub it in the face of everyone who said I was a villain in the making. Izuku nodded. I can get behind that. My motivations are half to spite everyone who laughed at me for wanting to be a hero, and half wanting to help people who are in the same situation that I was in. What about you guys? Yaoyorozu rubbed at her neck as a blush formed on her face. Well, my parents want me to follow in their footsteps and take over the family business. But to them, that involves being ladylike and proper. I didn't enjoy acting stuffy like that, and I decided that I wanted to be a hero after seeing Midnight on television. Ida hummed. Personally, I simply wish to live up to the ideal of my brother, Ingenium. I come from a long line of heroes, and while mother and father never told me that I had to go into the profession, I simply couldn't resist after watching Tensei in action. Kyuka shrugged. Same as Yaoyorozu, basically. See, I've always liked music, but when my parents' train got derailed and a hero saved them, I wanted to help people like that. Ochako sat there in silence, picking at her food. Izuku raised an eyebrow in concern. Ochako, you okay? Sorry, this is probably going to sound really dumb, but I've always liked seeing people be happy. I think it started when I was little, when I saw how the heroes always made the bystanders feel happy and safe. I always wanted to be the kind of person who inspired that feeling, you know? Izuku smiled. That's not dumb at all. She smirked and set her chopsticks down on the table. You know, a couple years ago, I would always say that I wanted to be a hero so I could support my parents with my paychecks. It usually made sense to the other kids at school, and they never pressed beyond that. But after saying it for so long, I kind of felt selfish when I saw people like President Mike being heroes to bring hope to people in trouble. Then we got hired to renovate Mick's agency and we started doing better financially, and I realized that I'd started running from the real reason I wanted to be a hero. I'd always thought it was a childish reason and that I needed something more concrete, but then things happened, and I decided that I could put up with being called childish if it meant I got to see people smile. You know? Izuku nodded. Yeah, I think I do. Later that week, Izuku and Kyuka dropped by the support workshop. An explosion blew the doors open, but it was thankfully smaller than the last time. As the vents above the door sucked up the smoke, Izuku cleared his throat and walked through. Hatsum, you still intact? The pink-haired girl pulled up her soot-covered goggles and cackled. Sure thing, boss. I've had way worse. Guman groaned from where he was laying face down on the ground, still wearing a charred and smoking jetpack-shaped device. Somebody, just kill me now. Hatsum chirped. Nope, you volunteered yourself as the class test dummy for the month. Not even death itself is getting you out of that. Kyuka snorted. Don't expect any sympathy. She turned to Hatsum. So, you mentioned that you had some new gear for me? Hatsum nodded. Yep, gimme a sec. She ran off towards her personal storage room, emerging shortly after with a fancy pair of boots. Here, I went ahead and upgraded your speaker boots for you. I watched the footage from your battle trial, and you launching yourself with sound blasts gave me an idea. She turned the shoes on their sides. I added speakers into the soles so that you can basically launch yourself with your quirk. Technically, if you have fine enough control, you could keep yourself airborne like King does with his explosions, but these are designed with huge jumps in mind, not sustained flight. They've got the same braces as King's boots, and the speakers are durable enough that you can land directly on them. No problem. I even managed to keep the retracting spikes in there. She turned the boots around and pointed to the back, close to the heel. See these two ports? The top one is for the front speaker, the bottom one is for the speaker in the sole, and this button here activates the spikes. Got that? Quirk nodded and grabbed the boots, immediately heading towards the testing area. Gumin already made sure these work, right? Hatsum laughed. Yep, I have my storage room organized into 2 areas. In progress and completed. I made sure to grab the ones from the completed area, so they won't explode on you. I'm also working on seeing if I can wire your suit so that you can activate the spikes with your gloves. Quirk grinned and closed the door to the testing room behind her, and Izuku turned to Hatsum. You got your classmate on that thing I asked for, right? She nodded and turned around, cupping her hands around her mouth. Oi, foodie, you get that thing done. A girl with short orange hair walked over, picking at one of her ears. Yeah, Teki, I finished it. She turned to Izuku. Midoriya Izuku, right? Shokamatsu Ayo. She fished around in one of her pockets, before pulling out what looked like a granola bar. Here's your gamer bar. Izuku took it in his right hand, scanning the wrapper curiously. You've got the recipe written down somewhere, right? Shokamatsu nodded. In a way, my quirk is called Recipe Book, and it allows me to keep a list of recipes I've used in a mental notebook. Kinda like your quirk, except I don't have a physical aspect to it. Go ahead. Izuku unwrapped the bar and took a bite, chewing a bit before swallowing. Immediately, he could feel his mental gas gauge shoot up. Damn, that's packed. And tasty, which is a nice bonus. So, 1 bar is the equivalent of a full meal nutritionally. Shokamatsu nodded. Just like you asked. Initially, I was wondering why Teki wanted me to make a high-calorie food bar, but once she finally got around to explaining, it made a lot of sense. Izuku grinned. Thanks. These should help out a lot. Shokamatsu grinned back. Not a problem. They should also be useful for when we're pressed for time on a project and can't leave the workshop for too long. I know Teki's gonna be a major customer. Izuku raised an eyebrow. Is there a reason you call her Teki? Shokamatsu shrugged. She calls me foodie. Izuku snorted. Fair enough. So far, Izuku hadn't put much thought into 1B or Gen Ed. However, with the sports festival on the horizon, they decided to make themselves known in a way that couldn't be ignored. The Thursday before the festival, Katsuki opened the classroom door to head to lunch, only to be met by a crowd of people standing in the hallway. What the hell do you guys want? Another boy with blonde hair pushed his way to the front of the crowd with a smug grin on his face. Oh, just letting the glory hogs of 1A know that they aren't the only ones competing in the sports festival next week. You've probably been basking in the attention so much that you forgot about 1B and Gen Ed, haven't you? Izuku scoffed. Bitch please. Basking in the attention, my ass. We were attacked and in very real danger of being killed. You think we're proud of that, Monoma Nito? You think we wanted to be attacked? Fuck that. Now shut your ass up before I put in a complaint with Kendo and Shouta about your behavior. Hitoshi glanced out the door and grunted. Togaike, I see you over there. Don't tell me you're encouraging this. A brown-haired girl sighed and pinched the bridge of her nose. I did not intend to come, but Monoma riled up the rest of the class, so I decided to come along as class representative and a voice of reason. Another student scoffed. I'm surprised Mr. Big Shot Hero bothered to remember anybody from his old class. Hitoshi rolled his eyes. I was only with you guys for a day. It's not like I had much of an opportunity to learn everyone's names. Besides, Togaike was like the one person who actually talked to me. Izuku sighed, and all attention turned to him. You do realize that this kind of first impression basically nukes any chance at positive relations, right? If you declare war in the very first meeting, it basically guarantees that we're gonna hate each other. I mean, sheesh, at least get to know a guy before you swear to kick his ass. Katsuki pointed his thumb at Izuku. What he said. Now move. I'm starving and you're blocking the way to the cafeteria. As the blonde stalked off, Monoma laughed sarcastically. You see. So self-absorbed that he gives no thought to anyone else. Izuku rolled his eyes. Nah, he's just an asshole to people who are assholes to him. If you didn't come out swinging with the declaration of war, he'd have been nicer about it. You had that coming to you. Ever heard of the golden rule? A girl with vine-like hair standing behind Monoma recited. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Izuku nodded. Bingo. You come at us like jackasses? We're gonna be jackasses back. Consider yourselves lucky that Kendo and Shouta gave a better first impression of your class during the rep meeting the other day than this sorry performance. Those two are probably the biggest reason why relationships with your class haven't been completely shot. Kendo appeared out of nowhere and smacked Monoma across the back of the head. Sorry about him, Midoriya. I swear I'm trying to reel him in, but nothing's working yet. Izuku grinned. It's fine. Can't wait to see your classmates show off in the sports festival next week. He raised his voice to address the rest of the crowd. You all want to declare war on 1A? Prove that you're just as strong as us? Fine. As class representative, I accept. But just making a declaration isn't enough. You have to prove that you've got the skills to back it up. Aizawa-sensei takes nothing less than the best in his class, so you'd better give it your all if you want to transfer. Plus ultra. Later that day, they came back to the classroom from lunch to find Aizawa-sensei and Kayama-sensei already standing by the podium. They quickly found their seats, and the bell rang. Aizawa-sensei sighed and stepped up to address the class. Right? Today's foundational heroics class is more informational than practical. Remember how I said you should be thinking about your code names? Well, today you'll be deciding on your code names for the sports festival. Usually, this would be held the Monday after, but since they're required this year, we're doing this now. Kayama-sensei seemed to take that as her cue. As for why I'm here? Well, I'm your judge. Shoyuta here is absolutely terrible with names, and considering I teach PR to the second years, it's the logical choice. Now, before we get into the actual decisions, something to keep in mind: your code name and your eventual hero name is intended to reflect on who you are as both a hero and a person. All Might, Endeavor, Hawks, Best Jeanist. All of them say something powerful about the person they refer to. In addition, changing your hero name is a very complicated process. So choose wisely, or you'll have hell to pay later. Kayama-sensei pulled a stack of whiteboards and dry erase markers out of the podium, and Izuku walked up, handing half of the stack to Yaoyorozu before distributing the items among the class. The room was soon filled with the sound of squeaking markers. Izuku tapped his marker against his chin in thought. Reflect on who I am as a hero and a person. Yeah, that'll work. He quickly scribbled out his choice and set his marker down on his desk, looking up at the board. After a minute or so, Kayama-sensei announced, "Now, since you'll all probably have to deal with the media at some point in your careers, it's a good idea to get used to saying your hero names out loud. As such, you'll be presenting your ideas to the class, going in order of seat number." Most of the class went pale, but Aoyama seemed unaffected, strutting up to the podium and proudly holding his board in the air. "I cannot stop twinkling, for my sparkle is eternal." Izuku blinked. "That's not a name, dude. That's a whole-ass sentence. I doubt the cameras are going to want to stay on the guy who takes a full 5 seconds to introduce." Aoyama frowned and slowly walked back to his seat. Ashido pranced forward and excitedly displayed her board on the podium. "Alien Queen." Kayama-sensei winced. "Isn't that a reference to the horror monster with acidic blood? Maybe go with something a little more kid-friendly." Izuku raised his hand. "If I could make a suggestion, maybe keep the queen part and precede it with something else." Kayama-sensei nodded. "Oh, definitely, that part is good. It's just that the alien part might put people off." Ashido hummed and scribbled on her board for a few seconds. "What about Acid Queen?" Kayama-sensei nodded. "Sounds great. Approved." Ashido grinned and skipped back to her desk, and the class started to relax. Sue walked up and placed her board on the podium. "I've had this one picked out since I was a kid, Karo. The rainy season heroine. Froppy." Kayama-sensei squealed. "Oh, that's just precious. I love it." Ida quickly walked up and presented his board. "The Nitro Hero Ignition. Excellent." Ochako walked up with a slight spring in her step. "You Ravity. Very nice." Ojiro rubbed at his neck. "I'm not quite sure about this, but Karate Kong." Izuku snorted. "Somebody's played Donkey Kong, Jungle Beat. Not that that's a bad thing, mind you." Kayama-sensei nodded. "Midoriya's probably going to have a monopoly on the references, but the copyrights run out, so it should be fine. Certainly better than something like Tailman." Satu immediately started wiping off his board as Kaminari strode to the front of the room. "The Taser Hero, Chargebolt. Excellent." Kirishima proudly presented his board. "Red Riot." Kayama-sensei hummed. "That's an homage to Crimson Riot, isn't it?" Kirishima nodded emphatically. "He's a huge inspiration of mine. I wanted to pay homage to him in my hero name." "Well, so long as you don't start using the names of his attacks, then you should be perfectly fine." "Approved." Kuda shyly walked up and displayed his board. The Petting Hero Anima." "Good, good." Satu rubbed at his neck sheepishly as he walked up to the podium. "I was originally going to go with Sugarman, but then your comment to Ojiro made me realize how that kind of sounded dumb, so I went with this instead. The Sugar Hero, Baker's Dozen." Kayama-sensei grinned. "Very nice. And definitely an improvement over your first choice." Shuji walked up and presented his board, one of his hands morphing into a mouth. "Tentacle. Very good." Kyuka walked up with a slight blush on her face. "I kinda got this from Midoriya. The musical heroine, Jack Sabbath." Kayama-sensei squealed. "Oh, that's precious. Approved." Siro grinned as he walked up. "Cellophane. Excellent." Fumikage huffed as he walked up to the podium. "The Shadow Hero Karayami. Fitting." Todoroki silently walked up and displayed his board. "Hyuga. Not bad." Hagakure skipped up to the board. "The Light Heroine, Mirage. Excellent." Katsuki walked up and slammed his board on the podium. "Tsar Bomba." Kayama-sensei winced. "I know it fits, but do you really want to associate yourself with a hydrogen bomb? That sounds like a good villain name, but I'm not sure if you'd want to be related to death and destruction as a hero." Katsuki scowled and stomped back to his desk, tapping his marker against his chin as Izuku walked up to the podium. The inventory hero. Save point. Kayama-sensei nodded. Very nice. Approved. Hitoshi walked up, reluctantly presenting his board. Hypnos. I'll allow it. Yaoyorozu stepped forward. The everything heroine, Creati. Good, good. For the two of you who are still thinking, my door is open until 5 p.m. today and all of tomorrow. You need to have a code name submitted by 9 a.m. on Monday morning, so that Present Mike can use it to announce you. Katsuki raised his hand. I've got another one. Ground Zero. Kayama-sensei grinned. That's more like it. Aoyama-kun, if you're having trouble, feel free to come find me in my office later today. We can discuss possibilities one-on-one. As for the rest of you, don't think you can relax. The festival will demand your best effort. Chapter 18. Present Mic's voice rang out over the loudspeakers. Ladies, gentlemen, and listeners of all identities, welcome to UA's Sports Festival. In just under half an hour, you'll get to see our wonderful first-year students show their skills. Aizawa-sensei groaned. I can't believe you talked me into this. Izuku took that as his cue. Standing up, he stuck his index finger and thumb in his mouth and let out a piercing whistle. Immediately, the entire room turned to face him. All right, people, listen up. We've got a lot of eyes on us out there today. They're watching the class that got attacked by villains and survived, and I want you all to show them exactly what we can do. Go beyond. The class shouted, Plus Ultra. Izuku nodded and headed towards the door, sensing the class falling in behind him and Yaoyorozu. They walked out of the room in double file, stopping just inside the hallway that led into the stadium. Mike announced, starting us off, it's the class that's already fought villains and survived. 1A of the heroics course. The cheers were almost deafening as the class filed onto the concrete square in the middle of the field. Izuku glanced up towards the civilian section of the stands, waving as he saw Mom sitting next to Aunt Mitsuki and Uncle Masaru. The blonde woman cheered louder and started waving wildly, and Izuku smirked as one stopped before the podium. Mike continued. Next up, the class with a little less attention, but no less talent. It's 1B of the heroics course. The crowd cheered again, but it was noticeably quieter. Izuku could see Monoma scowling from his position in the middle of the pack. Yaoyorozu and Kendo nodded at each other as 1B strode up next to them. Following that, it's our esteemed general education course, classes 1C, 1D and 1E. Only a few people in the stands cheered as the Gen Ed classes filed onto the field. Scowls were common among the new arrivals, and most of them were directed at 1A. Of course, let's not forget the biggest brains of all. Our support course, classes 1F, 1G and 1H. The cheering picked back up, and Izuku noticed a few support company representatives muttering as they saw Mei, completely decked out in support gear. The pink-haired girl was focused solely on that section of the stands and grinning like a maniac. Rounding us out is our incredible management course, classes 1I, 1J, and 1K. The level of cheering was somewhere in between the amount for the support classes and the amount for the Gen Ed classes. Acting as referee for today's events is the lovely R-rated heroine, Midnight. Kayama-sensei waved to the crowd from her position on the podium next to the microphone, blowing a kiss and making the crowd cheer even louder. Aizawa-sensei announced, one more thing before we get into the day's events. Due to concerns about the safety of our students, we've required our hero course students to devise code names for the festival. Midnight fiddled with something at her neck, and her voice rang out throughout the stadium. For our student pledge, we have the top scorer on the entrance exam 1, as class representative, save point. Izuku jerked, but quickly recovered and stepped up to the mic. We're all here for a reason. Those in the hero course are here to show their strengths. Those in the general education course are here to show their ability to stand alongside the heroes. Those in the support course are here to show that their minds are a greater weapon than their quirks. Those in the management course are here to show that businessman doesn't mean defenseless. Whatever the reason, we're here to do one thing: win. So go at it with everything you've got. We won't lose to anything but your best. And to all you villains who would dare to take us on, watch yourselves. Because once we hit the field in 3 years, it's game time. He thrust his fist in the air. Go beyond your limits. The crowd roared, plus ultra. As Izuku returned to his spot with 1A, Present Mike announced, what an inspiring speech. With that out of the way, let's get right into our first event. Midnight, spin that wheel. The giant screen underneath the announcer's box flickered on, displaying a spinning roulette wheel. After a few seconds, it slid to a stop, and the words expanded to fill the screen. Midnight announced, it's an obstacle race. Contestants will have to race along a track stretching outside of the stadium filled with various obstacles. And here at UA, our freedom is one of our biggest selling points, so as long as you stay on the track, anything goes. Quirk usage is allowed, and you can attack the other racers, but anything lethal is a no-go. Mike announced, the race starts in 30 seconds. Better get a good starting point. Immediately, the students started crowding towards the gate with lights above it. Izuku hung back, as did the other hero hopefuls. The hallway itself is the first obstacle. If you're not up front, then you're gonna get stuck in the middle. Katsuki huffed. It'll be like the break-in all over again. Izuku grinned. Not quite. After all, this time we're allowed to use our quirks to get through. Hyuga hummed. That would be comforting, if it weren't for the fact that I'm wearing my gym uniform and not my hero costume. Any ideas? Izuku snorted. Nah, this is an individual event. Figure it out yourselves. Present Mike started counting down from 10, and the air in the hallway grew cold. Shako frowned. I think Hyuga's going to freeze the ground once the race starts, in order to give himself a head start. Izuku sighed. Only worried about himself again. Ah well, see you on the other side. Present Mike shouted. Go! Immediately, the crowd of students surged forward. As predicted, those near the front got through almost immediately, but everyone further back got stuck trying to push through. Izuku ran forward and jumped, just before Todoroki froze the crowd in place. Izuku's hair glowed, forming his extreme gear in his right hand. Todoroki jumped in shock as Izuku sped past, the green-haired boy not even throwing a backwards glance at the other student. Todoroki started running, only to pause when the ground rumbled and several robots from the entrance exam erupted from the dirt ahead. Izuku paid them no attention, ducking and weaving between the limbs of the zero-pointers, as Mike announced the Robo Inferno. He was on the other side of the massive robots in seconds, streaking off along the track. Mike announced, and Save Point avoids the swarm with ease. As expected from our top performer in the entrance exam, he has no problems getting around these massive robots. Aizawa-sensei huffed. And with his quirk taken into consideration, there's absolutely no way for any of the planned obstacles to slow him down at all. We really didn't account for flight this year, did we? Mike shushed his fellow announcer. Quiet, Eraser. You'll ruin the surprise. In any case, it looks like Hyuga just froze the zero-pointers solid. Quite an impressive display of power from one of our strongest students. Aizawa-sensei grunted. Hyuga has a lot of raw power, sure, but the important thing is how skilled you are with it. For instance, if he'd thought to propel himself with his ice like I know he can, he probably would have kept up with Save Point a little better. Who, might I add, is already halfway across the second obstacle. Izuku snorted as his extreme gear flew over the chasm. A downside of the board was that it could only hover so far above a given surface, so he was forced to twist and turn over the various pillars and connecting ropes, rather than shooting straight across the gap. However, what the board lacked in altitude, it more than made up for in speed, and he was on the other side of the pit within seconds. Mike announced, Holy hot tamales! Save Point has already cleared 2 of the 3 major obstacles, and it hasn't even been half a minute, and he's already at the 3rd. Unfortunately, Eraser's got a point. This minefield is hardly an obstacle when you're riding a hoverboard. Boring. We need action. At least the others will provide plenty of that once they get past the fall. Aizawa-sensei added. And before any of you start grumbling, the hoverboard is a part of Save Point's quirk. The details are being kept private for the sake of security, but rest assured that it's allowed. Izuku quickly cleared the minefield, speeding over the dirt path and crossing the finish line at the 30-second mark, skidding to a stop on the field inside the stadium. Midnight announced, and Save Point is the first to finish, well before anyone else. Let's see if that early lead will come back to bite him in the butt later on. Izuku dropped the board, letting it dissipate as he leaned against the inner wall of the stadium and watched everyone else's progress on the giant screen under the announcer's box. Todoroki and Katsuki were currently in the middle of battling for second place in the middle of the minefield, and the rest of the hero hopefuls were just now getting to the 3rd obstacle. On the screen, Hyuga grabbed Ochako's arm and said something, but Izuku couldn't make it out. The brown-haired girl grinned and grabbed her classmate's arm, before leaning back and throwing Izuku's girlfriend across the minefield. Mike shouted, Holy crap! In a completely unexpected move, Uravity has just launched Jack's Sabbath over the mines. Aizawa-sensei chuckled. That's not all. Suddenly, Ochako went flying through the air, and Izuku could make out one of Kyuka's jacks wrapped around Ochako's arm. Once Uravity subjected herself to her own quirk, Jack Sabbath brought her classmate along for the ride. The 2 girls quickly soared past Katsuki and Todoroki, and Kyuka managed to hook her free jack around a nearby tree, flinging herself towards the finish line. Mike announced, Now this is a shocker, folks. Rather than Hyuga or Ground Zero coming in 2nd, it's Jack Sabbath, closely followed by Uravity in 3rd. Who knows what 1A will do next? Ochako placed her fingers together, returning the 2 girls' gravity. Kyuka walked over to Izuku and smirked, one hand on her hip. Couldn't let you get too far ahead of me, especially not after you left me to fend for myself. Izuku grinned. Have I mentioned how much I love you? Kyuka rolled her eyes. Only every week. Izuku snapped his fingers. Damn, gotta do it more. Mike announced, Hot darn. Coming in at 4th place, it's none other than Ground Zero. And in a surprising turn of events, 5th goes not to Hyuga, but to Ignition of 1A. That was some serious speed he pulled out to get over the minefield. Aizawa-sensei huffed. Ignition is known for his speed. In a wide open and relatively flat space, he's got plenty of room to let loose. Mike continued. And that's not all. It appears he was carrying Shokamatsu Ayo of 1H on his back. For once, we have a support student finishing in the top 10 of the first event. Aizawa-sensei snorted. And we're about to have another, considering Hatsum Mei from 1H just sped past Hyuga, bringing her in at 7th. Hatsum immediately buzzed over to Izuku, almost bouncing. Boss, That's a great piece of gear. You've got to let me look at it, so I can see if I can replicate it. Izuku hummed. You know, that's probably a pretty good idea. I know a lot of heroes would benefit from a mobility aid like an extreme gear, and if you can figure out how to make it yourself, then that could revolutionize the transportation industry. Imagine the profits you could get from that to sink into even more babies. Hatsum threw back her head and cackled maniacally. You bet. How much do you think it would take to convince Diglett-sensei to let me have access to the support workshops for the rest of the week? Izuku shrugged. Something to discuss with him, not me. Shokamatsu walked up. Yo, how's your tank? Izuku hummed, mentally assessing his reserves. I think I'm good for now, but I might want a gamer bar on hand for later. I know we've got lunch in between the second and third rounds, but you never know. Shokamatsu hummed and tossed him a wrapped bar. Gotcha. By the way, I heard a classmate of yours uses the same fuel source, and I was hoping to toss a gamer bar at her. Mind pointing me in her direction, Mike announced. And Creati crosses the finish line in 12th, wearing what appears to be a makeshift glider. Is it just me? Or is she looking a little thinner than usual? Shokamatsu nodded. That's gotta be her. The support student immediately headed off in Yairozu's direction, and Katsuki walked over. Hey nerd, next event's probably gonna be a team thing, right? Izuku nodded. From what I can remember, sports festivals usually have an eliminator to start, then a team event to whittle down the numbers, and then usually a one-on-one tournament after lunch to decide the winners. Katsuki huffed. Cool. I'll form my own team. Izuku grinned. So, an alliance? Katsuki nodded. Right? We each do our own thing, but we don't attack each other, and we help each other out if we can. Cool. Izuku nodded. Cool. Katsuki walked off, and Izuku turned his attention back to the screen. He watched as several more students crossed the finish line, until Aoyama limped into the stadium in 42nd place. Present, Mike announced. With Starlight Nova entering the stadium, we have our 42 competitors for the next event. Those of you still on the course, please exit and make your way to your respective areas of the stands. Those of you stuck in the net at the bottom of the fall, hang tight, power loader will be along shortly to dig an exit tunnel. Midnight cracked her whip, drawing everyone's attention to the screen below the announcer's box that was now spinning again. And our next event will be... The roulette will slid to a stop. A cavalry battle. The screen shifted, showing a ridiculous diagram of All Might, 13, Snipe, and Ectoplasm, with the blonde hero riding on the shoulders of the other three. This is a team event. You will form up in teams of 2 to 4 people. Each team must have at least one rider and at least one horse. The rider will wear a headband displaying the team's point value. The goal? Get as many headbands and rack up enough points to move on to the final event. Your point value is determined by how well you placed in the previous event. 42nd place is 5 points, 41st is 10, 40th is 15, and so on. This goes all the way up to 2nd place, with a point value of 205 points. Izuku hummed. So, the better your performance, the more you have to defend your points from other teams. Midnight continued. However, we here at UA don't believe in riding others' coattails to victory. As a result, the first place finisher of the obstacle race is worth 10 million points. Immediately, everyone turned to Izuku with hunger in their eyes. He met the stares confidently, his eyes holding a challenging glint. Midnight finished. You'll have 10 minutes to form teams, receive your headbands, and find a spot on the field. After that, it'll be 30 straight minutes of chaos. Now get moving. Your 10 minutes of prep time start now. Immediately, most of the crowd broke away from Izuku, forming their own teams and eyeing him hungrily. He turned to Kyuka and raised an eyebrow. Are you sticking with me? Or are you getting a new boyfriend? Kyuka snorted. We've worked together on enough things, it's time we had a little competition. Don't think we aren't going to mount Tekri this weekend, though. Izuku grinned as she walked off, before turning around. He grinned wider at the 3 other people standing next to him. Hero hopefuls together, eh? Chaco giggled. I sure hope you didn't think you'd be rid of us yet, boss. Fumikage chuckled. You are a paragon of light. Our darkness is more than willing to assist in your endeavors. Hatsum cackled. With all eyes on you, that's all eyes on my babies. I'd be a fool to join anyone else. Izuku smirked. Cool. I'll grab the headband. You 3 find a good corner of the stage. I've got a plan in mind. The 4 part is finished. If you missed the earlier chapters, don't worry. Head to the playlist and catch up now. Remember to support the author. Your support means everything. I'll be back with more soon. So stay tuned. Thank you for being absolutely awesome.